With that being said, I guess we'll go ahead and get ready to get started. Thank you guys for joining us this morning. We are so excited to be able to still be providing service and value to our members even during this time. So thanks again for joining the call. A few housekeeping options. All participants are on mute during this call, and you will be able to communicate with me by using your chat bar at the bottom of your screen. So if you scroll your mouse down to the bottom of your screen, you will see a chat icon there, and you are welcome to send me any questions that you have during this presentation. And that way, as soon as Steve and Stuart finish their initial question answer period, we will be able to take your question as well. Another note for you, this call is being recorded. So that way later, if there's something you want to go back and reference, you'll have the opportunity to do that. And it's also going to be on our Facebook page. And so with the questions that you're going to send, we really are trying to get general ideas of, how we can cooperate with the rule and how to have a better understanding of the rule. So this is probably not the time in your questions for specific what if questions. What if I have this person? What if I have that person? We're going to push those to your broker to kind of have that conversation. But hopefully with your questions that you ask, you can still get an idea of how to apply it to a what if situation. So feel free to go ahead and put those questions in there. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. I want to go ahead and introduce Steve Jolly, who is on the executive team of our board here at Greater Nashville Realtors and is also on the board with RealTracs, and Stuart White, the CEO of RealTracs, who are our guests today. And they're going to assist us in talking about this recently implemented National Association of Realtors Clear Cooperation Policy that will affect all local MLSs. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Steve and Stuart to take it away. And again, while they're talking, feel free to chat me any questions you have based on what they're saying. Okay, Steve, over to you.
Thank you, Christy. Hey, my name is Steve Jolly, and I proudly serve as your Secretary-Treasurer for the Greater Nashville Realtors for the year 2020. And our goal today is to bring you the facts about clear cooperation and give you an opportunity to ask questions. Now, if you're using Zoom to watch this live stream, please direct your questions to the host in the chat. And if you're watching on Facebook Live, you won't be able to direct your questions, but you can always reach out to support@realtracs.com. They're always there for you. The purpose of this forum today isn't to deliberate the rule, only to provide the facts about the clear cooperation changes. However, we will tell you the best place to share your complaints and share your concerns. Though we can't dive into the specific what-if situations today, we feel your broker would be the best place to start with those questions. And like I said previously, you always have support at RealTracs.com to ask to. And then we're going to wrap up by sharing additional resources in case you need to learn more. Before we get started, I wanted to share some information about RealTracs and the Realtor Associations. Most people don't know that RealTracs is owned by 7 local Realtor Associations right here in Middle Tennessee. Each association has a seat on the board of directors at RealTracs. And I serve as the Greater Nashville Realtors representative on that board. Now, the MLS was created more than a century ago to provide real estate professionals with a structured, competitive, collaborative marketplace for home buying and selling. An important part of that structure was a guarantee of cooperation and compensation between members of the MLS. And that guarantees every agent and their clients an opportunity to participate and a guarantee that you will get paid a commission. An offer of compensation in the MLS is a contractual obligation. Last November, at the National Association of Realtors annual meeting in San Francisco, the NAR Board of Directors voted to pass the clear cooperation rule changes by an overwhelming majority. 728 out of 800 board members, your fellow realtors across the country, approved these rule changes. Now, it wasn't a vote taken lightly. There was much debate across the country in committee meetings and at the board level leading up to the November vote. And now with a mandate from NAR to change the rules, RealTracs made the necessary changes that will go into effect April 1st, 2020. And that brings us to where we are today. So I have the pleasure of introducing Stuart White, CEO of RealTracs. Now, Stuart is here to answer our questions and also make this easy for us to understand. Hello, Stuart.
Hey, Steve.
Welcome to the Greater Nashville Realtors live stream, and thank you so much for taking your time today.
Well, thanks for hosting this. This is totally new for me, and I just want to thank you all for providing this venue. This is pretty cool.
Oh, you're welcome. So, not to waste any time, let's go ahead and dive into it, and I'm going to give you the first question.
All right.
These first initial questions are some of the most frequently asked questions we've received. And then after we're finished with these, we'll take those questions that you directed to the host in the chat. And so our first question is, why did the board at NAR approve clear cooperation?
Well, fundamentally, this goes back to the Code of Ethics. The code requires realtors to cooperate with one another. And so this is not a new policy. This is not something that is anything that should surprise anybody, that there's some rules around cooperating with other brokers. That the venue for or the medium for cooperation since the 60s has been through the MLS. And so the rise and basically in the past 10 years since the last recession of pocket listings has created a whole bunch of conversation about cooperation. And so pocket listing basically being a listing that you have taken, that you're advertising, but you're not sharing it or cooperating with your fellow realtors. And so the last summer, the MLS Technology and Emerging Issues Committee came up with this policy, and it was vetted in so many different committee meetings, I can't tell you, and through Council of MLSs and through NAR and NAR's large broker forum. And so the reason is to say that basically it's upholding the Code of Ethics, that the obligation to cooperate with one another is put in writing, basically.
Okay, thank you. In the simplest terms possible, can you describe our local clear cooperation rules?
Why, sure. I mean, it's really simple. It's three things. First, if you have a listing, an exclusive listing, because we don't take other types of listings. If you have an exclusive listing and you're advertising it to the public, then it must be an MLS.
Okay, great.
That's it. Pretty simple.
Yeah, that is simple. Another popular question we've gotten is, does this rule prohibit Facebook groups and breakfast clubs that focus on buyer needs or coming soon listings?
No, not at all. I mean, the great thing about realtors, and you have to know that I respect what realtors do so much, is why I'm so devoted to serving you all and providing a platform, is that you all do extraordinary service, provide extraordinary service to your customers and clients. And so any networking, that's all being a great realtor. So this has nothing to do with networking or opportunities.
Okay, that's great to know that the rule doesn't prohibit agent networking. Now here's a little bit more specific question. Okay. So if an agent at another brokerage has a buyer need, and I will have a similar listing signed in the near future, can I share that with the agent?
Absolutely. Again, it goes back to the three things. You have to have a listing agreement and be publicly advertising that for that marketing rule to take effect. So okay. if you have a listing coming that you know is coming down the road and it meets somebody else's need, then you can certainly share that.
Okay.
If you don't have a listing.
Okay, so the RealTracs jurisdiction, for lack of a better word, starts when you have an exclusive right to list a property.
Yes, that's when the cooperation policy kicks into place, basically, is when you take that listing.
Okay. And so why is it that? Why can we advertise prior to that?
Um,
I guess it's because of what I just said, because that jurisdiction starts when we have a listing agreement.
that's right. That's right. Yeah.
I answered my own question.
There you go.
Now, some folks have said that this will lead to agents advertising before the listing agreement. And so what do you think about that?
Well, since that's out of our purview of authority, that would fall under TREC rules, and any kind of advertising that you do, you need to run that through your broker and talk to your broker about that and see if that violates any kind of real estate commission rules.
Okay, yeah, that's an important thing to note here is that, you know, the Tennessee Real Estate Commission, they regulate all advertising, and they also hold your broker responsible. And so the rule says you have to have a written agreement in order to advertise. The TREC rule says you have to have a written agreement in order to advertise a home for sale. And so I think talking to your broker is before on what exactly to say before you have a listing agreement. I think that is a great answer. Here's a good question. So is it an automatic violation if a listing enters the MLS in pending or closed status?
Not at all. I mean, I can think of dozens of situations where a listing could be entered in that way. It's really, you're going to have to look at each situation in and of itself to see if there was public marketing after the listing agreement was taken that was not put in MLS. And so the other situations, I mean, there are tons of them. So, I mean, you could be talking to somebody, one of your neighbors, and they're getting ready to move in 3 weeks, and the property, they want you to list it, but you don't have it listed, but you have a buyer that might fit that property. So that's just one example of a ton that I can think of.
Okay. And so once you have a listing and you start to advertise, that means you have 48 hours to submit that listing to RealTracs.
Yes.
Okay. What tools does RealTracs have to control listing information for buyers that have privacy concerns?
There are 3 things in the system that pretty much meet every seller's situation. So the first would be if a house isn't ready to sell. We do have the, it needs paint, whatever. You obviously are going to take the listing at the time that they've committed. And so you just need to put that in under coming soon status. The second would be a seller who does not want their information broadcast over the internet to the masses. This is has been a concern for sellers that their information's out there and just ubiquitous. And so when you're adding a listing to the system, there is a flag on the listing that you can say that says share internet. If you just put that no, it won't be broadcast in IDX feeds, to Realtor.com, to Zillow, to any of the third-party aggregators or advertising sites. And then the third situation for a seller would be if they don't want it broadcast to the public or to any other brokerage firms. And this is a rare situation, but they do occur. Those are called office exclusive or exclusive listing agreements. Office exclusive is the correct term. I'm trying to
Or exempt listing?
Exempt, that's the word I'm looking for. Exempt listing, and those are allowed, and you can share that information within the brokerage firm. but you just can't publicly advertise the listing. So those are the three tools that you have in RealTracs. We were fortunate that we implemented the coming soon status when we did before this policy came into play, because without the coming soon, a lot of MLSs are having trouble trying to scramble to implement both coming soon and clear cooperation. So that was a good thing for us.
I agree. So how does the seller exempt a listing from the MLS? And is there a form that they can use?
We're currently working on a form. They need to have that in writing and have that with the listing agreement. We will have, as soon as the legal folks get their hands off of the form, we will have that available on the site for any kind of exempt listing, and that'll be sent to support, I believe, at RealTracs.com.
Okay.
And so whenever you take a listing and it's exempt from the MLS, you'll just send in that form.
Okay, great. And I guess in the meantime, if people need to exempt a listing, they should just notate that on their current listing agreement.
Correct.
Okay. And so to be clear, what are the ways somebody could advertise an exempt listing and still stay within the clear cooperation rule?
They can have it on private networks within their office.
Okay.
I know that there are some companies who have kind of a shadow system that's not available to the public or to other brokers. They can announce it at sales meetings. They can network with their current customers and clients, and
Okay.
that's it.
Okay. That seems easy. Here's another good question. Can I show my listing when it's in coming soon status?
No. So coming soon is basically saying the house isn't ready to sell. It's not ready to show, and so there's a prohibition against showing homes in the coming soon status.
And that's been in effect since we've had coming soon. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. And if somebody decides to show their property and it's in coming soon, they just need to immediately change that to active so that it's fair for everyone.
Correct. And so the MLS rules aren't there to dictate how you do business. They're there to reflect the status of the listing. So if you are showing the property, it should be inactive.
Okay, great. Another good question. How does this rule affect new construction?
It does not apply to new construction as of yet. I mean, they may modify that later, but it's very difficult if you have a new construction property. When was the first time you started advertising that? So right now it's exempt.
Okay. If I disagree with clear cooperation, what can I do about that?
Well, again, this policy was debated and fleshed out and argued and modified, remodified through the National Association committee structure. And so but it was also approved by the board of directors. I think there are about 800 members of the board. So you could raise this issue with any of the directors from Tennessee and voice your complaints. They have a process to filter those through back to the leadership at NAR, or you can contact NAR directly, and you can just go to nar.realtor, and there's a contact us button. And if it's a policy question or a policy concern, they'll direct you to their policy department.
Well, that's good to know. That's good to know. How do I report a violation of the clear cooperation rule?
You'll just need to provide some details to us and a contact information, and send that email to data@realtracs.com, and we will follow up on each and every one of those that we get.
Okay. And what kind of information do you recommend that they provide?
The listing address, the listing broker, the listing agent, and just kind of some general information about why you think it might be a violation of clear cooperation policy.
Okay, that's good to know. And then one more time, in the simplest terms possible, will you describe the clear cooperation rule?
Absolutely. If you have a listing agreement and you are advertising it publicly, and that would, the public advertising or public marketing is defined in the new rules. So you can look, there's some examples of that too. So that includes yard signs, flyers, agent networks, intra-agent networks within, among brokerage firms. And then it must be an MLS within 48 hours.
Okay, great. Great. Thank you for that simple explanation. Hey, Christy, that is all of the initial questions. What kind of questions do we have out there from our realtor members?
Okay, so one of the questions is a clarifying question of, so are you saying that if I talk to people outside my brokerage, that's okay as long as I list that property in the MLS within 2 days?
That is correct.
Okay. One of the other questions is, so can I share coming soons within my company and not to the general public and not have it on the MLS if that's what the seller is wanting?
If you have an office exclusive listing agreement, then you can certainly do that.
And but you just have to have that, I guess, approved and signed by the seller. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, and one of the questions is a question clarifying something that came out in episode 3 from RealTracs. And it says in the RealTracs news, they're saying there's an actual form that a seller must sign to be exempt, and it's called the Seller's Waiver of Broker Cooperation. Where is that form?
That form, if we hadn't had this coronavirus and a tornado, we would have that finished. So it is at the attorney's office, and we are going back and forth. So we'll have that before the deadline on the site.
Okay. So in the interim, the question was, can the listing agent write something in special stipulations of their listing agreement that their seller waives the right for it to be on MLS?
Yes. As long as they don't publicly market it.
Okay.
And my suggestion, sorry,
ahead.
Christy, my suggestion would be that they have that conversation about the implications of not publicly marketing that listing with their sellers also.
I think it'd be good to really explain what all the different options that they have so that your client can make the best decision for their own personal situation.
Okay. So I'm just going to read this one because I'm trying to make it through. But so if you can sell a house before it's in the MLS and put it in as a pending, but you can't show a house in coming soon. So therefore, the person needs to show their own listings before putting them in coming soon status. Meaning, is it okay for, I guess, a realtor to show their own coming soon, or should they not be showing the coming soon at all?
Let me see if I got this correct. So if you have a listing, when you say your own, I'm assuming you're the listing agent.
Your own listing, you're the listing agent, and it's not on the MLS.
Right.
Can you show it?
No. You can't show it to well, let me clarify that. I don't really actually, Steve, do you know the answer to that question?
I mean, I believe that you would be able to show it to your clients and your customers, and you'd be able to show it to other agents in your brokerage. But outside of that, you can't allow other agents to show their clients your listing, because that would be, I assume that would be considered advertising.
Yes, and that's what I was thinking, but I just wanted to make sure before I put my foot in my mouth.
And that's my opinion. And if you'll make note of that question,
I sure will.
Christy, and we will make sure we get we'll get a for sure answer out there.
Okay, thank you. Also, can you share an exempt listing with an agent from another brokerage if they have a potential buyer?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Can you share an exempt listing, so a listing that you have an exemption on, with an agent from another brokerage if they are the buyer? If the agent from the other brokerage is the buyer.
No.
Okay. And if you guys
That would be considered advertising if you're sharing that outside. Well, it depends. Okay, so the agent from the other brokerage firm is the buyer, is the actual buyer?
That's the question. Yes, I'm sorry.
I guess if that other agent was your client, possibly, but that's probably not going to happen.
That's probably not going to happen. Yeah. Okay, let's see. Okay, new construction is exempt. But what about a flipped home or a home that is currently being remodeled? Is that considered exempt as well, like a new construction?
No, it's not. I mean, if you're publicly advertising the home, then it has to be in the MLS.
Okay, so I think the thought process was, on a new construction because it's being built, and on a flipped home or a home that's currently being remodeled, they're also, constructing it, and so just to clarify, you're saying that's not exempt.
That's not, but they should put it in coming soon status if they're not ready to show it.
Okay. Okay, let's see here. This is a, public opinion probably question, but why is having discussions with your office different than discussing it with other agents outside my office? Is that just because that's the rule, or?
Well, it goes back to the cooperation component with your fellow realtors. So if you're having a discussion with a select group of other agents or brokers about a listing, you're actually not cooperating with all of your fellow realtors.
Okay. Steve, anything that you want to add to that?
I really don't know the answer to that question. I wasn't sitting around the table when those deliberations were happening about the rules. So I don't know why they made that distinction, but that's a good question that we can reach out to the technology committee, the MLS technology committee, and see if we can get an answer from them.
Okay. Can you bring offers? Say I'm at a listing appointment. Can I bring an offer with me to a pre-listing appointment? I mean, I guess the question is, they're not actually showing it. They're at a listing appointment. If they already had an offer, would that be a violation of the MLS rule?
No, that would not.
Okay. Is a virtual video tour, considered showing the home in coming soon status? I guess, does it depend on where you put the virtual video tour? No. Meaning if you send it out to the public? I don't know.
Not necessarily. I mean, they're going to take pictures and add media to a coming soon listing. So a virtual tour would just be a media portion of that. So it's not actually physically entering the property. So if you have pictures and media that you want to append to a listing in coming soon status, then that's fine.
Okay. And for clarification, in between the 48 hours that a person has, if they did market it outside of their firm, and they've marketed it to someone else. During that 48 hours that it's not on the MLS, can the property be shown?
Yeah, as long as it's not in coming soon status.
As long as it's not in coming soon status on RealTracs?
Yes.
Or, okay.
Well, I mean, it's not in MLS, right? So it wouldn't be, I mean, the rules don't apply yet. So is that correct?
Well, I don't, okay, you agree?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let me see.
Well,
okay.
once you start showing, you can't then put it in coming soon. Then you're going to have to go straight to active status.
Okay, so within that 48-hour period,
right?
If you start showing it, when you put it in the MLS, it needs to be active.
That's correct.
Okay. Let's see. So as long as I don't allow a buyer to physically enter property during coming soon, I can enter and video and show the house that way.
Of course.
Yeah.
Okay. So while I look for more questions, maybe we can just recap some of the things we're saying. And Steve, you'll probably have to help me with this, but
okay.
Steve and Stuart, let's work together here. Okay. So when an agent takes a listing within a listing agreement, they can market that property outside of the MLS, but as soon as they do, they need to have it in the MLS within 48 hours.
Correct.
If the agent within that 48-hour period shows the property to anyone, then after the 48 hours, that property does not go into coming soon in the MLS. It goes into active.
Correct.
If an agent is going to a breakfast club where they are talking about listings that they have coming soon with agents from outside of their firm, after they had that conversation at the breakfast club, or let's say in a Facebook group, as soon as that happens, within 48 hours, it needs to be in the MLS.
If they have a signed listing agreement.
If they have a signed listing agreement. And the signed listing agreement is key, because if you don't have a listing agreement, should you be marketing a house anyway?
Track says no. Track says, that you have to have a written agreement with your seller before you start marketing their home.
Right. And that's a real estate commission rule, primarily to not confuse consumers, right? Because they're there for the protection of the consumer.
That is correct.
Okay, so just to clarify, seller's instructions could override these rules if they have that form signed that you were talking about earlier. Is that right, Stuart?
Yes, as long as you don't publicly advertise the property.
Okay, so if a seller signs this form and says, I don't want my house in the MLS, you're saying that that's okay, but the agent cannot go and market it to anybody?
Only within their brokerage firm.
Only within their brokerage firm.
Or one-to-one with their own clients.
Correct.
Okay. So, for those, I know that there's some saying, hey, we want to make sure we have a responsibility to follow our sellers, orders that they give us. And so for everybody here, if, for clarification, if your seller is saying they don't want it there, RealTracs has a form that you can have signed. Once it gets completed, they will send that out to us. Is that right, Stuart?
Yes.
And then if not, talk to your broker about, language that you could put in your listing agreement if the seller didn't want it to be on the MLS, but understand you're then marketing it to agents in your firm. And then who else did you say they could market it to, Steve? If they have that sign.
With that listing agent's clients on
Okay.
a one-to-one basis.
Okay. Okay, so this is kind of a what if question, but maybe not. Let's just test the waters. I've had a signed listing agreement for 6 months. Let's say you've had a signed listing agreement for 6 months that the seller said, they did not want to put on the MLS right now because they're painting it, they're making repairs, etc. How can a person put a listing in the MLS for 6 months in that kind of coming soon status?
Well, currently our coming soons allow you to do that for 30 days.
And what would you do? Keep
You
putting
just
it back
extend
in?
it. Yeah, you just extend the 30 days until the property is ready to be shown.
Okay. Oh, okay. Can a buyer's agent submit an offer while a property is in coming soon status and make it contingent upon the buyer seeing the home when it goes active?
Absolutely. I mean,
Okay.
you can put an offer on a house sight unseen.
Is there any opportunity to extend coming soons for more than 30 days?
Well, you can extend it yourself.
I
There's
mean,
no
to
prohibition.
increase the limit. I mean, to increase the limit farther out than 30 days so the agent doesn't have to continue to extend it.
I mean, that's something the board would need to discuss, what makes sense. So if anybody has that question, just send it to me and I will take it to the board and we'll discuss the situation where they would need longer than 30 days. Again, they can extend that themselves past the 30 days. So that's just the system default so that we don't have a ton of properties in coming soon status that are not accurately being reflected in the system.
Okay.
And I think
Go ahead,
Christy,
Steve.
I think another alternative to that would be to go ahead and put it in active status and turn your internet listing off. And what that's going to do is it's going to basically do the same thing. It's just going to broadcast that listing only in RealTracs MLS. So only your fellow RealTracs members are going to be able to see it. It's not going to go out to any other portals or third-party websites or IDX if you turn that internet listing switch off.
Okay.
It kind of has the same effect of a coming soon.
I'm assuming
in the way that property is syndicated.
Okay. I'm assuming that everybody knows where that button is that you're talking about, the, internet. But perhaps, can we do something where we highlight where that is just so people know where it is?
Sure. I made a post, I think last week in the Middle Tennessee Professional Realtors Forum. And our listings management system is in the process of being updated. I'm not sure if that's live now yet.
It is.
It is. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So in the marketing section of that listings management, at the very top is where you turn the listings off, and that'll turn it off off the whole internet. And then below that, you'll see where your broker is syndicating that listing out to the third parties.
Okay, thanks. We've got about maybe 5 more minutes for questions. So if you have one, feel free to text that in. And I know one of the things that I hear often is people say, okay, well, is this rule limiting competition? Is this rule limiting competition? Is it less cooperative? Do you guys have an opinion on that before I give mine?
Steve?
I mean, I don't know how it can be less cooperative if you're sharing it with more people.
Right. And I know that I've heard this before and, did serve as one of the NAR directors. And I think what people have to keep in mind is this rule is saying if we all play by the same rule, that once we have a listing signed, we will put it in the MLS either as a coming soon or active. It gives more options for cooperation than if individual agents and brokerages kept all of their listings to themselves. So this is just saying if they kept one to themselves, they can only do that for 2 days, and then they need to put that on the MLS. I mean, is that an adequate summary?
Yes, and I think it's important for realtors to remember that any system they're using that's incomplete or may not have accurate data, that should really concern them. And so I think that the whole marketplace has been driven by cooperation, and we do have the greatest marketplace in the world. The real estate marketplace is the envy of the world, and that is driven because of the code of ethics and the obligation to cooperate with your fellow realtors. And so I just would be very cautious of if anything is limiting or exclusive or within a certain group. There are tons of legal and fair housing issues that come with that also. And so I think it's just best for the industry and to keep this your jobs, very in a robust society, in a robust marketplace.
Thanks for that. I did have one other question come in that we haven't addressed yet, and that's about broker opens. So it's a coming soon property. I've got a listing agreement. I'm having a broker open house. Is that permitted? Is that seen as showing properties?
Yes.
So so after I had this broker open and it's not on the MLS, after that, all I would need to do is put it in the MLS as active. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So let's see. I think this is our last one there. Was there some place that highlighted what the fines will be if there's a violation? I think I've got the links to that. Is that right? Can they find that on the RealTracs website?
They can. Now, the board did not establish fines for this. I mean, we don't think that this is a very complicated rule. And it's not the same as having an incorrect piece of data in the system or something like that. So this is really more about the intent of the MLS. And so you either are going to cooperate or you're not going to cooperate. And so it really boils down to making people aware of what is not allowed, which we won't know until we get complaints in about people violating the rule. And then we'll try to educate first, but in the over the long haul, if this continues to be a practice of a brokerage firm, then that's okay. Go do your business that way, but you can't belong to MLS. Steve, you have anything to add?
I mean, I think that's fair that all members of RealTracs should abide by the same rules. That's pretty simple.
Okay. There were two other questions. I don't know if you guys want to do this, and then I know we're going to go ahead and close out, but how does this rule apply to auctions or online sales? Is there any difference for auctions?
No, there's not. The auction policy, once we got rid of the separate auction category, an auction is just a condition of the sale. So it's the same rules apply.
Okay. Well, I want to thank Steve and Stuart for being under the gun and trying to answer questions that our realtor members have. And it seems like this is still something that's going to need some ongoing conversation so people can continue to get questions out and clarification. So again, a great first step for you with that is with your broker, but also I've included in the chat bar down here the email for support at RealTracs if you have other questions and concerns that you may need to have addressed. And again, I think it's important to remember that, as Steve said at the beginning, a group of your peers, other realtor members, large firms, small firms, brokers, individual realtors voted on this rule as a way to help us all work better together. And the spirit of the rule is that if you have a coming soon, you are not exclusively just sending it to 5 of your best realtor friends, thus limiting yourself and opening yourself up to potential liability. But if you did do that, within 48 hours, you're going to put it on the MLS. And that's to make it open and fair for everyone. And I think realtors also remember that that's going to hopefully mitigate some of your risk if a client or customer comes back to you and says, no one told me about this property because it was in some fair housing situation. And you don't know that if you don't give yourself an opportunity to protect yourself against some kind of accusation of that fact. So I really believe that's the spirit of the rule, to try to work together for cooperation and do what's in the best interest of consumers. So I do again want to thank Stuart and Steve for taking the time to do this with us today. And I hope you guys got something valuable from this. And as always, I'm here. Our board is here. Our staff is here. So let us know if there's something else we can do. But in the meantime, thanks for tuning in.
Thanks, Christy.
Thank you.